Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be covering the new 11-star Wingard series and seeing just how they stack up comparatively to the current 10 stars we have in the game today. But if you're new to the channel, my name is Chrono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate to subscribe as we work our way towards that 10K mark, hopefully by the end of this year. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So apologies, this video is a little bit later than I really wanted it to be. Those of you guys who follow my content know that I was away for the weekend. My younger sister got married, so I had to go out, had a nice little, basically like a little mini vacation because of course my sister could not do things in a simple matter. So I had to go all the way out to some island for her actual wedding. And those of you guys who know my fear of deep water, that was a fun boat ride. But besides the point, unfortunately, I didn't have videos ready ahead of time. Because I'm really good at planning my content. That's a bad joke. But either way, I'm just now getting to this. So made some time. It's kind of like in the middle of my workday. So this is going to be kind of quick. And honestly, these videos aren't too complicated. I want to make them as simple as possible since numbers can be very complicated for some people. I want it to be very easy to see this information and for you guys to gather exactly what you need when you go through this. So just be paying attention to key details. I'm going to explain a couple of things and I'm going to explain where we're doing these calculations based on, what we're using for it. We're also making a few tweaks to how we do these comparisons based on some feedback from some individuals in my comments as well as my my Discord. So just know that some things are going to be a little bit different than we usually do it. But I have rambled on enough in the intro. Let's jump over to the page. All right, here over on Cakewalk's damage calculator, which you can see has been updated as of the 18th of this month. Thank you very much to Cakewalk for getting that taken care of super quick. Also, we are messing around with a little bit more of like a dark mode thing. I'm messing around with extensions. Hopefully this is a little bit easier for you guys to read over on your end. I actually want to make sure because I haven't looked. See, yeah, unfortunately the grayscale is going to mess around with this. Hold on a second. All right, this is the best we're going to be able to do. So let's go ahead and go over just a couple of things here really quick before we do our comparisons. As always, we have our standard buffs up. We have our standard add-on skills added. Keep in mind that if you don't have your add-on skills rolled, they do play a pretty large part in the choice of your fixes and things of that sort. This is assuming that you're kind of into your end game, you're actually rolling your add-on skills and things like that. If let's say you're a little bit earlier on, you're like, hey, I'm not 100% sure. As I've always told multiple people, you guys are more than welcome to join my Discord. Shoot me over a DM. Let me know where you're at and kind of what your goals are, and I'll be more than happy to kind of like lay some stuff out here for you. Again, I'll be looking into doing something more personalized for my channel members and for my subscribers in the future. So just keep an eye out for that. Or if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Anyway, we're going through our standard buffs. So food buffs, standard add-on skills, all 20. Feel free to go ahead and adjust for yourselves. I've made tons of videos showing how this works. And then of course, we're going down to what our comparison is going to be. So first off, the first bit of feedback that I got was people wanted to see a comparison based on like actual current, like, you know, best in slot gear. I always thought that wasn't really what people wanted at first. I used to do this a lot, but people were like, oh, well, these are not realistic or these aren't really obtainable. I personally disagree. I feel like they are very obtainable. Tons of people do have best in slot, and honestly, you work your way towards what you feel like is your best case scenario, best case setup. So feel free to adjust it here. In this situation specifically, it doesn't make a huge difference because we're not dealing with massive differences in crit variance. We're not getting a crit potential from our weapon or anything like that. So that's usually where the different types of augmentation makes a difference. So what you'll find is that the difference in damage actually is mostly going to be the same if you were to go with LC augments versus best in slot augments when you're doing comparisons of the two, right? So basically what I mean is if you're doing a best in slot comparison augment of a Rayar versus, you know, the new the Wingard series with best in slot augments, it's going to be roughly the same amount, the same difference as if you were doing with LC augments on both weapons. So it doesn't really make too much of a difference. And in the future, if it is going to make a sizable difference, right? So the higher amount of potency is going to make a bigger difference, then we'll talk about it per case basis. But this will be how we do things moving forward. So what we have is a Rayar Fatale 2. Again, Fatale 2, very attainable. Essentially, you have the first roll is mostly free. Everyone gets them. You get 3 per week. So make sure you are rolling at least a level 1 fix on your gear and keep re-rolling it until you get the one that you actually want to use. In this case would be Fatale for us. If you were playing, I believe, a Force, you'd want to go for Width. And if you were playing a I want to say a Slayer, right? It would be Termina. So just so you guys understand kind of where you're going for there. And again, for Slayer, it's going to make a bigger difference with the raw potency, since they're of course going for crit damage as opposed to crit chance. From there, we have just our augments we're going to be using. And again, you can substitute these in for any LC augments you guys might have. And our standard armor, same sort of augments all the way across the board. We are playing Bouncer Slayer, so we do get the extra 5% crit chance. Let's say, for example, you're a different class, you have less crit chance. Totally understandable. Raw potency is going to be a little bit less effective for you. However, it mostly comes out to be roughly the same values. You can basically use this as a guideline, not like an exact, this is the rule, like not a rule book, but basically a guideline on what you can be going for when it comes to your gear. And the cool thing is for those of you guys who like to go with the Abandak comparison, you now have an accurate Abandak comparison, since we are using current best in slot, and the Abandak setup was the best in slot setup. In case you're curious, here's the Abandak setup with 18 unique potential, or 18 unique augments. That way you can get the best case scenario out of your setup. We are doing this with targets up. We are going against Falls Dalian, but we can set this up for, like, realistically, I mean, we can go with custom and we can do level 89 enemy, and that's completely fine, bossing focused. And you get mostly the same sort of comparisons, but since Falls is what everyone is doing, it's the better comparison to go with right now. Also gives you an accurate comparison for those using Wix. So very nice there. So we have our damage comparison. We can see our Rayar. We're using Rayar 2, which is 65%. Again, I really feel like Rayar 3 is kind of where most people are. So this is giving a little bit of leeway in that regard. And we can see we have our Zover weapon, which is not super far ahead. We talked about this when we did the Zover comparison. However, if we take a look at our Wingard, we can start to see a pretty sizable difference, even if we're looking at a base Wingard. So let's say if we're looking at, actually, I'm going to push this over to Rayar 3. I really feel like this is the case for most players, and I haven't had anyone really disagree with that. So feel free to let me know if there is a class you feel like is less reliant on PAs, is more reliant on, other things. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Or just DM me directly. I always read the comments. I mean, I always answer them, but I do see them. Either way, so we're going with Rayar 3. So this is kind of best case scenario for Rayar. As you can see, base Wingard with no fixa is actually 1.3% behind. I mentioned this when they first announced Wingard, that just because it's 11-star weapon doesn't mean it's always going to necessarily immediately be better. It's going to require fixa, and fixa is always the easiest to get. However, they did actually make it much easier to at least get fixa level 1. So even in, let's say, a worst case scenario, we roll Termina as a bouncer, right? We want Fatal, we'll even take attack. Let's say we roll Termina. Kind of sucks, not the end of the world, right? However, in comparison, we can see we're already ahead of our Rayar with just level 1 fixa. So to ask yourself, hey, how much of a fixa do I realistically need to beat out a base Wingard? You should probably be thinking to yourself, how much of a fixa do you realistically need to beat out like a fixa 1 Wingard? Because everyone has access to a fixa 1, whether it be your Slayer with Termina, or whether it be everyone else outside of a force when it comes to Fatal. So let's take a look at pushing ourselves up to Fatal 4. Something I've seen a lot of people at. So we're looking at Fatal 4. As you can see, we're still ahead when it comes to the Zover series. Or sorry, the Wingard series. The Wingard is still ahead when it comes to 1 fixa. So this is kind of the hard part right now when it comes to the fixes. It is pushing ahead. So let's go as far as Fatal. Well, this is pretty much where you need to be at to be thinking to yourself, I don't need to get a Wingard immediately. So fixa Fatal 5 Rayar is going to be about 2%, 2.5% behind a fixa Fatal 1 Wingard. So about roughly a 2.5% difference. Not the end of the world, not too terribly bad, right? However, you got to keep in mind, this is comparatively to a Rayar. We also have the Zover series. So let's throw a Zover in here. Swap it over, right? So let's go Zover. Let's go Fatal 5. Well, Zover Fatal 5. Wingard still pushing ahead pretty handedly. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why is Wingard so far ahead? What is really pushing it ahead? Well, it has a little bit of an advantage with its potential. Its potential is giving it a damage bonus, and right now the damage bonus it's calculating is based on being in a full party. So the full party damage bonus that you're providing. So it is a little bit skewed in the case of the Wingard, because the Wingard is getting that extra damage bonus. Actually, I believe it's even mentioned here in the notes. Yeah. So Wingard stats are confirmed. Updated Wingard effective potency to be applied to a party of 4. So this is getting a bit of a bonus. It's kind of why you would see a few weird shenanigans if you were to, let's say, look at, is it on my list anymore? Oh yeah, Wingard providing 4-man buff. That's why you can see a little bit. So you have to keep in mind the type of content you're doing. Most people are going to be doing 4-man content. So this is going to be the case for most players. So realistically, this gap isn't nearly as big as it looks, but it is a fairly decent sized gap. So how strong is Wingard really? Well, if you're comparing it to a Rayar or a Zover at its max potency, like its max potential that it can be at, which is Fatale 5, or of course, Termina 5 if you're playing Slayer, well, then you're looking at a roughly 2.5, 2.7% difference in damage overall when you're looking at party play. When you're looking at solo play, that gap is much smaller, but those of you guys who are looking at solo play, those of you guys who are looking at, doing this sort of challenges and that sort of content, I feel like you guys already know these sort of things. So you guys know how to calculate these. I want to do this for, of course, everyone else that's, looking to complete DFD, Dark Falls Delin, or, other pieces of content wanting to complete it effectively or efficiently. Meaning that you all get a good amount of power if you don't want to interact with the Wingard series. Keep in mind that to go past Fixa level 1, you need another Wingard. So most people are going to be chilling at that first level unless they have access to some substitutes and some upgrades, or they happen to get insanely crazily lucky and had a high Fixa to begin with. And I will tell you, because of the way that weapon drops currently, that does exist. You will see these weapons drop in price. You will see them become available pretty well to everyone. However, you're not going to be really 5 to 10% behind if you can't get a hold of, the current weapon itself. Even at a Fixa level 5 Fatale, Wingard in its best case scenario is still only ahead by about 6.2%. So it's not the end of the world. If you want to save yourself some money, you want to go for, let's say, Zover at a high Fixa level, by all means, you'll do fantastic. But I would highly recommend at least being somewhere in the range of either a Zover, a Rayar, or a Wingard. Full guard isn't bad, but I feel like that's like, if you're trying to push damage, that's the low end of where you want to push your damage. Full guard's best kept as your PB stick until you get a Wingard. Then the Wingard is kind of your everything. Hopefully that kind of answers the questions you guys might have today. I'm going to slowly scroll through this, that way you guys can see other comparisons if you'd like. You can see the Fixa Wix on a weak point, Unwix on a non-weak point, Blaster with PB and things of that sort. So if those of you guys who are going with the other Fixa types, you can see kind of the comparison there. Maybe some of you that are using, Fixa Attack, because maybe that's what you happen to roll and you happen to get a high Fixa variant of that. Kind of see those comparisons as well. Let me know if there's anything I missed. Feel free to leave it in the comments below, or again, DM me directly. I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe when you keep up with more, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, my friends. Peace out.